Hello, this is Oscar from Underdog, and I want to talk to you today about one thing that drives me freaking nuts when you're looking up music, how to get better at music production online. One thing that you'll always hear is use your ears. If it sounds good, then it is good. You know. This is so frustrating. Oh my god, it's so frustrating. Just it's like if you are learning how to paint and you're not getting the effect that you're looking for, and someone comes to you and you says, just use your eyes. Just use your eyes. I mean, on a deep and fundamental level, it is of course true that is the only real way with which you're going to access this information. But someone who's learning, they don't know that. They don't have the mental apparatus in their mind to be able to visualize a positive way forward. They're looking for tools, they're looking for concepts, but they're lacking those concepts. And so they don't know. They might say something sounds 80% good, but still 20% bad, but they have no idea how to even put into words why does it sound bad, because it's so subtle. And then if you don't know why you're not getting there, then you're blocked from learning. Because, well, I mean, what can you Google? What can you look up on YouTube? How do I make my music less bad? Well, you can't because you don't have the words to ask the question. If you know that you have a problem with something very specific, like my drum programming isn't interesting enough. If that's what you've identified as your problem, then you can Google that. Google it, and there's books, and there's courses, and there's there's YouTube tutorials, and there's techniques, and you'll get better. Someone will tell you, or you will figure it out. But if you don't have the words, it's pointless. So if you say, hey, should I use a compressor or a limiter on my master? There's always going to be someone who says, just use your ears. Just use your ears. And yeah, you're going to be like, well, thanks, but my ears are the ears of an amateur, not the ears of someone with years of production experience. And that's why if you see a professional producer or an experienced producer working, he might be making decisions that seem to be like grasping in the dark for you. You have no idea why he suddenly reaches for this one plugin when he has the option of 20 plugins. And he seems so confident about, well, he's certain that this is what it needs. And that's intimidating, that's intimidating. So how do you get to the point where you can actually benefit from something like saying just use your ears? Well, I would say the first thing you need to do is to be in touch with someone who knows more than you, someone whose vision is actually more nuanced and developed than you, and have an open line of communication with them so that you can ask questions and make sure that they are eloquent enough to explain these things to you. It's not obvious. Like, it's not easy. Someone can be a really good producer but not be able to explain anything. Some of the most talented producers I know, I tell them, oh yeah, like on the spectrogram, and they'll be like, I've never opened a spectrogram. And I'll be like, what the heck? How do you figure out how to go forward? But those people, they didn't need a spectrogram, because this particular person I'm thinking of, I wonder if he'll notice that I'm calling him out on the video. This particular person would have like several years of music academy behind them where they learned acoustic instruments. So the loop between them making a sound, them hearing the sound and judging the sound in somewhat of an objective and emotional, well-calibrated way was already there. They already had sensitive ears, like ears that knew when something sounded too dark or too bright or too muddy or whatever. They didn't need that spectrogram. So anyway, the point here is that if you have a teacher, make sure that teacher can actually communicate these things to you. And this is why I'm such a big fan of the word vocabulary. You need vocabulary. You need to be able to say what the problem is, to be able to figure out if you actually have identified the right problem or not. This to me is absolutely fundamental. Then the next step is trial and error. Trial and error is try something, see if it works. And if it doesn't work, that's fine. But you need actually a lot of experience about that to be able to make judgments about it. But it's not enough. If you do trial and error, you might say, okay, like I just did a video about kick drums. So imagine we make a little bit of a brighter kick drum, we make a little bit of a darker kick drum. You may not feel like it's much different. Like, who cares if you do a little bump in the EQ there or a little cut in the EQ there, or you use this version of a sample or a slightly different version of the sample. You may think it's arbitrary, and that comes down to the question of how are you testing your assumptions? How are you testing what's good or not? The fastest and most effective way to test an assumption would be to just compose the music as you think it is, listen to it with fresh ears, as fresh as possible, and see if it impacts you emotionally. That would be the perfect loop, right? There's a lot of problems with that loop though, because it almost never exists, because you've composed it. So you already know what's coming. You've got your ego into it. You've heard it 100 times, so you don't listen to the mixdown objectively anymore. Maybe you're not listening to reference tracks. There's 100 things that could be impacting the fact that you can't actually judge the audio that you're listening to. And that's challenging. But for instance, I work a lot with dance music, and that is an area where the test is very possible. Like the most logical test would be to play your tracks to an audience on a dance floor in the middle of other tracks that are aimed for the dance floor, and see if the audience reacts as well to your tracks as to another track, like professional tracks. And once you do that, you will notice that your tracks either fall apart. Very possible, very sobering and humbling experience when that happens. It has happened to me quite a few times. But then sometimes they don't fall apart. And sometimes you say, whoa, hey, this works. Like the energy level is doing exactly what it needs. Oh, and then you notice sometimes emotionally, because you're listening to it in this fresh context, you're like, oh, here I could have done this. Here I could have done this. Okay. This fills up your jar of perspective that you can take back into the studio, But sometimes just sitting in the studio, you use up all your perspective and you just come up dry. You're like, I've lost perspective now after 20 minutes, after an hour, after 2 hours, after 4 hours, after 8 hours in the studio. I have no idea if I'm making good decisions anymore. And another good friend of mine says, the moment you don't know what you're doing, just stop. Just stop. Because if you're not certain, if you're not doing things with confidence, odds are you're working backwards, working against yourself, and you better put things away until you have fresh ears, And fresh ears is a huge subject in itself. So the comments, just use your ears. That's a big one to unpack. It's a big one to unpack, and it's one of my pet peeves that frustrates me no end. And it's doubly frustrating because at the end of the day, it's true as well. Like, it is true that once you've learned all the rules, if you learn all the techniques and you have a good perspective and you know what works and what doesn't work, and what you can make some audio do and what you can't make some audio do, then suddenly you realize, like, yeah, I could just use my ears and not worry too much about rules, and suddenly it becomes true. But it's a mountain summit or like a plateau at the end of a long climb, which is a bit intimidating. It's a bit intimidating. That was just a little rant I wanted to do, because I'm sure some of you have seen this as well. You ask a question online, you say, how do I do better snare drums? And someone says, just use your ears. Just use your ears. And then you went home, used your ears, didn't get any further, quit, frustrated. You wouldn't be the first. So don't get frustrated. Get yourself a mentor, expand your vocabulary, put names to things, find an outside loop that replenishes your insights, where you put your music in different contexts so you see it coming back at you and you understand in this new context what all the decisions that you did before, how they have impacted what's, you know, the song and how it performs in the new context. And don't give up. Just remember that good enough is good enough. There's no such thing as perfect audio. You just express the thing that you need to express with the tools that you've got as well as possible, and then just let it go out into the world, you know. So anyway, just a little tip from my side. Hope you have a good evening. Take care. Bye-bye.